Hey, to whoever may need this nugget of encouragement, things will be alright, so quit your worrying. I get it, the odds seem stacked back against the wall, but even consider it such, know you'll stand tall. Sat and watch from the sidelines, one too many times. Wicked games we play make me wanna lose my mind. Found solitude, knowing it'll be over soon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Contrary to the Culture. I am your host, Jaysa King. This podcast has been created solely to explore the depths of cultures around the nation. We will have interviews from experts, challenge the mainstream ideas surrounding the cultural identities in our society, as well as make sure we touch on misconceptions we have about. All episodes are brought to you on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. on all major podcast platforms, not to mention my website, audacityofwomen.com. There, under the podcast tab, you can find transcripts from every episode. In order to know how we're doing, I need you to show us some love. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, comment your experiences, but most importantly, turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of the episodes. Now that that's done, let's jump into our episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Contrary to the Culture. And as you know, on Tuesdays, we come on here and we talk about the nitty gritty. We talk about the culture. We talk about our communities. We talk about the things that we wish someone would have told that girl when she was talking in that group. It just didn't sound right. We definitely are trying to find a way to bridge the gap for accountability, y'all. There are so many lives that we live that just don't make sense, that don't mesh, that don't align with what's actually happening in reality. So the whole purpose of this segment, you can say, is to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable, that we are talking about the topics that need to be talked about. And today's topic is called partnership, money versus respect. Now, this topic comes to me because of the things I've been seeing on social media, things that I've been engaging with in my own marriage, and just conversations that I feel like we need to have as male and female. Okay, so when we are engaging with one another and we think we know something or we think that we are all moving at the same pace in life, this is what this topic is going to be about. All right, so tell me this. When you think about a partnership, when you think about a relationship, a group of people that decided to stick together, there are always two things that people seem to focus on, whether it's money, profit, economy, how they can benefit in some way, or the respect, the way they're being treated, their boundaries, the way they're able to assert themselves when it comes to those group of people. So if we know this, if we understand this concept when it comes to partnerships, how is it that as the generations that continuously come up do not understand that everyone has their own expectations in these different categories? My thought is this. When it comes to my marriage, there are certain things that are personal, so I'm going to limit what I actually share with you guys. But on the aspect of money and respect, there is no versus. For us, it is one and the same. Money is how we live. It is how we take care of our home, our son, and each other. We cannot live without it, unfortunately. It is something that will always be at the root of our marriage because, again, it is what keeps us going. It's our livelihood. However, what I have noticed to be different is that a lot of people allow it to dictate whether or not they make it, whether or not they see value in that person. Y'all remember back in the very olden times where if you gave a father a goat, that equates to marriage. Whoever had the better goat was able to take that child. And the thing is, in some way, shape, or form, we have been able to transfer that idea into relationships. There's no longer bonds formed. There's no longer connection, love, intimacy, none of those things. It literally did a full 360 and we were right back at square one, to where instead of taking it as, oh, I'm just going to sell you off, we are deeming people worthy based on what they can contribute tangibly. And again, this does not just fall under money. I have to make sure I reiterate. But it is not just about money in this sense. It is about complete value. It is about what that person has to offer in a tangible sense, something that you can feel comfortable at night knowing will always be there, what will keep you warm until it runs out. Whereas when we are talking about respect and relating it back to my marriage, that is something that we require. It is something we will not fold on when it comes to how we treat one another, how we build our home, how we teach our son to be with other people. There are certain things that are geared through emotion and how we gauge whether or not that respect needs to change to give someone a chance to have a space to vent, or if that is allowing someone to learn. Everyone is not at the same level when it comes to these two concepts. And this is not me saying that these are the only two concepts in partnership. However, it is two that I constantly see come up and people misusing it. I find very often that, especially with my minority parent, not me personally, but me personally, y'all, but they have a habit of throwing this word respect around and classifying it as whatever feeling they are having in that moment. And if it is not agreed upon, if it is not taken in properly or to their standards, that person is now disrespectful. So when we think about our relationships, we think about this understanding of how we move forward with people. We commonly deem them as disrespectful if they were not doing what we either told them to do or expected them to do as a male or female. For example, there was a video I came across for a podcast. Y'all don't ask me the podcast because I don't remember. But this lady was discussing how a man basically told her, "You do not know how to communicate," that he was not going to allow her to talk to him any kind of way. Now, first thought, I instantly understood because I had been that woman where I expected, because I was the woman that I had my emotions, that I was triggered in that moment, that I had the space, the ability to say what I wanted, how I wanted to say it, give me a moment to get it off my chest. And when I'm calm, I'll come back and talk to you how you expect to be talked to. Yes, we all at least know two people in our lives that do exactly that. Is it right? Of course not. Can you understand it? Can you understand that it is a level of communication, a level of maturity that people are displaying? Of course you can. Now, if you're ready to acknowledge that, that's a totally different conversation. However, back to the podcast. So the lady is talking about this and sharing her example, and she instantly went to, "That man was so disrespectful, I had to let him go." And of course, being in a room full of other women that did not understand this concept just yet, we're supporting her. We're saying, yes, you should never allow that man to talk to you any kind of way. You did that, queen. Y'all, this queen phrase is really getting out of pocket. But anyway, and there was no sense of accountability in this conversation, just validation. No accountability, just validation. So when we are in these positions, when we are understanding that this is the dynamic when it comes to relationships, partnerships, respect versus money, or respect versus success, maybe that's the name of the podcast, we need to take a step back. We need to adjust and understand the two sides of this coin. So let's step back even more and break down the success or monetary or tangible piece of this partnership from a male's perspective. Again, I am a woman. I am a woman through and through. I am a wife. I am a mother. However, I have a lot of conversations with the men in my circle, men in my life, men that have raised me to this point, and I believe I have a little bit of an understanding. Okay, it's very simple. Everyone follow me. Men are to provide. This does not mean that they are expected to just give you all of your wishes that you've had since a child. This does not mean that every time you have an impulsive, just necessity that you have deemed a necessity, but is not a necessity. So what would that be? A desire, a want, something to fill your void in your heart, in your soul, the things that you have just allowed to take away from you that you now want impulsively. This is not their responsibility to do that. My husband's responsibility as the head of home is to make sure he's going to work to pay the bills, is making sure our security is right, meaning we are living in an area to where he doesn't have to worry about killing someone at night. But if push came to shove, my husband's gonna do what he needs to do because he is the provider, he is the protector. He does these things to make sure our security, our well-being is always intact. Okay. Now let's flip it. When we think about the role of the woman when it comes to success, when it comes to the tangible things that we are so just stuck on, we think of the home. We're building a home. We are raising our children. We are the nurturers. We are the ones that are teaching. We are guiding. We are creating. Okay. Our home is built in a structure. That is our husband. And after that, it is filled with love. It is filled with empathy. It is filled with wisdom from the woman who is there to cater to it. So when we are thinking about these two roles, this is not meant to focus on the traditional sense, because there are plenty of women that understand this concept, that make their own money, that do their own things, that step out and make sure that they are also part of the home. They are co-head households, if you really want to break it down that way. But at the end of the day, they understand that I don't need a category to understand my role. There is no need to try and put dubs on the fact that, oh, you're going to let a man tell you what to do in order to understand your role. Those aren't thoughts that come into a woman that has understood this mind. It's not something we think about. And I say we now. If you would have caught me a year ago, yes, just a year ago, I promise you I would not be on the same page. However, it's like a lot to understand where I needed to stand in order to gain cohesion, to move forward, to get to what I was trying to get to, not only for my family, but for myself. Okay. So now let's flip it. Let's transition over to the respect aspect, right? We talked about this being more the emotional, the understanding, the boundaries, the things that are going to make us work together just a little bit better. This comes from me and, again, my husband: communication, transparent communication, vulnerable communication, comprehension. Okay, these are things that go into communicating when you are on that respect side, because it is something that you cannot always see. It is not something you can always fathom. It is not something that comes with logic sometimes. It is going to be a concept that if you are not personally willing to step into, you will not understand, you will not have, you will not achieve, because again, you cannot tell someone what respect is. Now, well, does everyone have a different tolerance level, as my husband likes to point out? Yes, we all have very different tolerance levels. However, that does not change the idea of respect. This does not change the fact that there are sure things that determine whether or not something is respectful or disrespectful. You can respectfully disagree. You can respectfully tell someone your boundaries. You can respectfully tell someone to leave your life. There are so many things that we can do in this state of mind that cannot be classified as disrespect. You may be offended. You may feel as though you are not ready to let go. You may feel bothered by this truth that you are now facing. At the end of the day, until we understand that disrespect is not a phrase that we can transform into the understanding or the comprehension or definition that we so choose, we will get to that first level of communication. As I mentioned with our minority parents, it is a hard task, again, that I see with our minority parents when it comes to communicating. There's always that understanding or that thought that children cannot say anything to them, that there is nothing that a child can say. There is no wisdom that a child can share until that child is an adult and is in a position to share that wisdom, to share that experience, that they even get the side look. There is not ever a point that most minority families have been able to address the fact that they are in a position to communicate just as much as that child or that younger partner is. And as we mentioned in the beginning, this partnership is not just about relationships. It's not just about intimacy. It can be any form of communication. It can be any form of relation. Okay. So when we are talking about this thing and we're talking about bridging the gap of understanding, sometimes it has nothing to do with different cultures. Sometimes it has to do with generation. Sometimes it has to do with the home. Sometimes it has to do with siblings. Sometimes it has to do with all these different forms of community. And we never think to break it down small enough to actually take care of at home, right? There are so many things that are going on in this world. There's so many things that we are trying to take on at once that we do not realize. You cannot do it all at the same time. You have to be in a position to say, okay, I can take on this right here because this is always in my face. This is something that I need to acknowledge, I need to deal with. For me, it's going to be making sure I am a proper model for my child, making sure I am present for my husband because he does all the grunt work right now. So that is my personal role. And if I'm able to touch two people, I am able to extend that and touch everyone they touch along the way because they are sheltered, they are taken care of, they are in a mindset of understanding I know my role when it comes to this partnership. For my son, it's different. His to success and the respect aspects are going to look totally different for my son than they would for my husband. So again, we are emphasizing partnerships look totally different with each person you encounter, but the moment we understand that dynamic, we understand how it's going to look when we are trying to engage with one another instead of trying to compete with one another, we are at an advantage. We are at a position where we can move forward as one. So I would say when I think about this topic, when I step into this space, I have to understand what are people constantly dealing with? What is something that they are in need of? What is something that I can do or wisdom I can share in order for them to better understand that we have a responsibility to our roles first? Because everything starts at home. Every generation has had this shift, right? Another example I always bring up is our great grandparents. Their focus was to get to a point of freedom. At least mine was. Getting out of that mindset of having to do for everyone else, having to be the ones at the bottom. That was my great grandparents' role, right? So they may not have had a woman and woman and male, well, yeah, wife and husband type of dynamic. They may not have been at the point where you stay home and you take care of the kids. They may not have been there because all they were all thinking about was more selfish acts, making sure they were okay. All right. And then we push forward. We go to my grandma, my grandparents. They had more of a segregated time. And I'm speaking more so on Black experience because that's what I have. That's what I am. But we all understand this dynamic, right? The examples still stand, even if you have to tweak the details. We think about our grandparents. They were at a position where now it's time to build home. It is time to build our house. It is time to make a position where we know where home is. We know where we can rest our heads, where we can have that sense of peace. They were more focused on creating families, bringing money home for the family, making sure they were protected, creating memories, doing things to establish themselves in their positions. Then we move forward a little bit more. We go to my parents. We go to that generation right after. They had a different sense of duty, their responsibilities. When I tell you, thinking about my parents now, I would say their duty was to create a legacy, was to set the stage for us. Go out. I need you to explore. They were the explorers. That's a good way to describe it. I would say our parents' mindsets would be the explorers. They were the ones to go out and have some adventure and bring back what you find. Let me know. However, remember the focus. Our focus for that generation was to create the American dream, was to find what they needed, the resources, the skills they needed in order to obtain the American dream. That is why I can say personally, my parents in that generation had a huge push when it came to making sure we had 9 to 5s. They have a lot of 9 to 5s. They have a lot of blue collar in that generation, and they've looked down on us sometimes, the ones that are right after them, their children that have more aspirations and dreams of being their own boss. That does not compute. They worked their asses off to get to the point where they were able to have stable income. that blue collar job with insurance, with benefits, with resources, all these things in order to make sure that their home was stable the way their parents had expected them to do. And now here we come, the generation I want to finish with that found a way to do that, but through their own passion. And that's where I think communication started to lack, where I think we forgot our roles. Now we think about the partnership again. Our parents, my parents, that generation's role was to educate me on how to do things elevated. My job should not be to continue to teach my son the same level of understanding that I have. I need to educate myself so I can educate him a higher level, one level up. When he's ready, coming up, when he's ready to raise his kids, his job is to teach them another level up. We should constantly be elevating our sense of understanding our roles. So when we're thinking about partnerships, again, my parents' role was to teach me how to be better, how to have my dreams as well as security. At least that's my understanding. And my role was to go out there and do what I needed to do to make sure that not only was I focused, but I was able to show someone else how to be themselves, how to embrace this new skill, how to be in their passion, how to go after it without falter, without feeling as though we had to just relate to other people, that I was able to be myself. And that's something that, again, breaking it down in a more broad spectrum, we're thinking about our partnerships when it comes to success and respect. We ended up losing respect for ourselves because we no longer knew who we were supposed to be. We were throwing out this propaganda of this is who we are. Why aren't you like this? When in reality, we were literally transferring that narrative into a way that forced people to be who we told them to be. We have taken so much out of the roles of being successful and respect. We just haven't. We've lost it. And there's so many factors that go into this topic. So I will not drag it out too long because I'm going to start confusing you. But I do want to leave you with remembering our roles. This does not always mean traditional. This does not always mean kissing the ass of that man or kissing the feet of that woman. There are so many aspects and levels to this that I challenge you to take a step back, pick one partnership that you have in your life and analyze where you fall when it comes to those roles. Remember, these two categories for this episode are focusing on the success, the money, the tangible, and the respect, the emotion, the boundaries, the self-constant understanding, the self-awareness, y'all. Those are the two categories I want you to focus on when you look at that relationship. And if they do not align the way that you believe after listening to this episode makes sense and that should look like, you need to readjust. You need to understand how could this change benefit this partnership if I'm able to adjust. And then share it. We can't gatekeep information. We can't gatekeep habits. We need to share it with both sides because at some point that partnership is going to become one-sided. You're going to give up because you think that person isn't willing to do the same. We don't know everything. We are learning as we go. So anyway, that's our episode. Contrary to the culture, this was partnership, money versus respect. I am Jasa. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next Tuesday, y'all.
All right, that was our episode. Thanks so much for listening to Contrary to the Culture. Again, I am your host, Jasa King. You can find full show notes from today's episode at audacityofwomen.com under the podcast tab. Let's connect on Instagram at Just Jasa Podcast. There you will find clips from our various segments and more information about yours truly. If you're loving the podcast, I'd be so honored if you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a review. Until next time.
Ever need a boost, count on me for the 1-2. Trouble don't last when the tough get going. Baby, all we do is win, so show me my opponent. Adversity, doubt, stress, could care less. Cause how we handle those like an S on our chest. Super proud of how we held it.